Episode 5. This seems to be a very divisive episode with fans. It's either it seems like fans like this episode or don't really like this episode, considering it one of the worst, if not the worst in the series. While I don't agree with that, and I actually really like this episode, there is definitely very clear issues with the episode. This is actually my 5th favorite episode in the series, which also actually means it's my 4th least favorite, but we're not going to talk about that. It has some pretty major problems with it that I feel like if they were fixed, this would easily be one of the best episodes in the series. Hello, I'm Squire JPG, but you can call me Squire, and I want to talk a little bit about episode 5, why I like this episode, and how I think this episode could have been done a little bit differently. In case you haven't noticed already, I am recording this without a script, so if I make any mistakes, I have an excuse for it. Alright, so first I want to talk about the things that I actually like about this episode, and the first thing I want to talk about is actually the setting of the episode. The Elliott Manor is actually such a nice setting. This place looks so good. It's also a really good change of pace for the series, where most of the series takes place on Copper 9, which is a mostly very cold color palette, while this is a mostly warm color palette, which is really cool. I think it helps the episode stand out. Another thing that's actually good about this episode is the screen time that Jay gets. Yeah, Jay actually gets screen time in this episode. Crazy, right? This is something I talked about in my previous video a couple days ago, which you should totally go watch if you haven't seen it. I don't think Jay gets enough screen time in the series. Also, other than a few small appearances, this is really the only time that we actually get screen time with Tessa, and it's like, yeah, you can make the argument that Tessa was actually in episode 6 and 7, but actually no, because this isn't Tessa, this is actually Sin. This is Sin screen time, not Tessa screen time. Episode 5 is really the only time where we get actual proper screen time with Tessa, the real Tessa. Also, I want to talk about how much I actually really like the designs of the characters in this episode. I'm a sucker for maid outfits, alright? And I actually love all of the designs this episode. I think everyone looks amazing. I love Maid Sin, I love Maid J, I love Maid V, maybe a little bit too much. I mean, what? And then obviously N is the best boy. But Envy at the end of this episode was absolutely insane, and I would kill for more. Also, on the topic of how the characters look, I have a little bit of a theory that I'm gonna put in here about why the humans in this episode are black, shadowy, glitchy figures. Is that one thing that we know about this episode is that this episode is a flashback specifically of N's memories. So I feel like a reasoning as to why the humans are shadowy figures in this episode is that either N forgot what the humans look like, or more likely that what the humans look like was deleted from his memory, so they kind of just show up as black figures, which I think would be pretty cool. I don't know, maybe it's confirmed, maybe it's not, I don't know. One thing that this episode actually does really well that I think everyone can pretty well agree on is the lore. This is the lore episode of the series, and I think it does that very well. The lore reveals in this episode were absolutely insane. And those are really the things that I actually really liked about this episode. Obviously there's other things like the comedy I think was fairly decent, the pacing I actually didn't mind, but there were some pretty big issues with the episode that I'm going to actually talk about now. The first one being the placement in the timeline of the series. The transition between 4 and 5 is not good. Just at the end of 4, we're on a bus going from a camp, and in episode 5, we're in N's memories because he passed out. I feel like that's kind of a very big jump that doesn't really get explained. So it's not really an issue with the episode itself, but rather is more of an issue of something that should be there that isn't there. And this is the part where I actually mention Intermission, which, by the way, if you have not seen it, it is very good. You should totally go watch it. And it takes place in between episode 4 and 5, and I think it works as a pretty good transition between the two. It's not perfect, it's a fan work, it's not a film project, so it's not perfect, but it is very good, so I thought I'd talk about it. But there is actually a few things that I would want to see in a sort of intermission episode between episode 4 and 5. Is obviously, I think somewhere towards the end of this in-between episode, I feel like it would make a lot more sense for us to see when N and V kind of pass out from the program, kind of messing up trying to delete the memories. I feel like if we see that in the episode, it makes it a little more sense and connects it better to the 5th episode instead of it just being abruptly kind of doing that. It was kind of weird. Maybe like either N and V either see something or do something or hear something or something that triggers that to activate, which would mean that we would get another reveal, whether that be something new or something in the series that happens that we don't get a good explanation for. Also, one thing that could be explored in this episode, considering where it takes place in the timeline, is see a little bit into what Jay and Sin were doing on the planet. Because this is after they arrived, but before they had the meeting with Doll at the end of episode 5. I feel like going and seeing at least a little bit into what they were doing on this planet would make sense. Maybe somehow finding a way to communicate with Doll and making clear that Doll was trying to get the key bug, I think would make a little bit more sense. Because in episode 5, Doll just kind of shows up trying to get the key bug, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. So I think at least a little bit of a setup for that would have been really good. And obviously one thing that I think would be great about this episode that actually Intermission does, and I really love it for it, is specifically what they do with V's character. V in Intermission is absolutely amazing. Also, this is good, a chance to give Jay more screen time, which obviously is something that she needs more of. And it's like they have a gap between these 2 episodes. They could totally put an episode in there. We have to keep in mind that, yes, while the series, at least for now, is officially over, Glitch isn't gonna stop making Murder Drone stuff. We know that. They've said they're not gonna stop. So I feel like it's totally within the realm of possibility of them making an episode that takes place in between 4 and 5 without them having to commit to doing an entire new season. They could just do one-off episode, put it in between. I don't think anybody would complain. And now on to the actual issues with the episode itself. And the first part I'm going to mention is the fight scene between Jay, V, and Tessa. This scene is so cool all the way up until the point where it gets cut off, which sucks. I hate this joke so much, not because it's an awful joke. I think it's a whatever joke. But the problem is that we cut away from something interesting to cut to this okay joke, but then we never go back to the interesting fight scene that we were just looking at. So I think what should have been done is that this scene was extended, which is actually something I talked about in the previous video I did a couple days ago, which you guys should totally go watch if you haven't seen it. But also, I think they have an opportunity to do something interesting with this fight that they don't actually do with any other fights in the rest of the series. See, all of the fight scenes that are like in the series are usually one side going against the other side, and that's cool. But I think one thing that this fight scene that could do is do something different that none of the other fight scenes in the show do. Specifically about how this fight scene isn't a direct just fight in between the 2 sides, but this fight is specifically about getting control of the basement key. I think having a fight scene that is not focused on 2 characters fighting, but rather characters fighting over an object, I think would be something super cool and super interesting that the show doesn't do anywhere else. I think just the key constantly being juggled between all the different characters of them trying to get it to the basement, I think would be very cool. Obviously with it ending with N getting the key and just making a mad dash for the basement, and then having the rest of the episode in the basement scene kind of play out how it normally does in the episode, sorry. Obviously so that we could get the second best line in the entire show. Dark X Wolf 17! I don't care what anybody says. This is the second best line in the entire show, and I would never want to get rid of it. I love this joke so much. The reason I say second best line in the show is because my favorite line in the show is actually this from episode 8. I'm fine and calm and go away. I don't know why. I just love this line. I just love it. Obviously with N making a dash for the basement, it means that V would be focused on trying to get that basement key from N, which would allow Tessa and Jay to then escape the fight scene and go to the gala, like normally in the episode. Which is where the next issue of the episode is the gala massacre scene, more the lack of a gala massacre scene. I do find it kind of ironic that the last thing that we hear Sin say in this scene is, "You didn't have to see this." Which is really funny considering that we don't get to see the scene. Give me a fucking bow, call me Tessa, because I wasn't supposed to see this. No, I really think that we should have been able to see this. This was something that they were kind of hyping up throughout the episode, and it was like, oh shit, it's happening, and then it just doesn't show us it. So that's a little disappointing. A pretty big factor in this was budget and time. They probably didn't have as much time or as much budget as they kind of wanted to actually make these things happen. However, that doesn't mean that these aren't still issues of the episode and are kind of issues I wish weren't here. Anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I want to keep making videos on this channel about like murder and stuff like that, but I don't have any other ideas. So if anybody has any ideas, I would gladly take them, because I want to keep doing stuff, but I don't know what to do. It could be more video essay stuff, more of a discussion stuff, I don't know, or maybe something completely different that's a little more fun. It could be anything, I can do it. Anyways, hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you guys next time.